10 classic rock superstars, all of them gone before the story was done. But here's what I keep coming back to. It wasn't just that they died young, it's that they died right there, at the exact moment where you could see how big it was going to get. And that's the part that doesn't leave you. That's what this list is actually about. Number 10, Bon Scott. There's a version of rock history where Bon Scott gets to walk into the studio and record Back in Black, where he's there for every minute of it. The sessions, the mixes, the release. That version doesn't exist, but it almost did, and that's what makes this one sting differently from most. By the summer of 1979, AC/DC had been grinding for 6 straight years. Album after album, released primarily in Australia, while America and Europe stayed largely unmoved. Then, Highway to Hell hit, real airplay, real chart positions in the US for the first time. You could actually feel the wave starting to build underneath them, the kind of wave that only arrives once if you're lucky. And then February 19th, 1980, before a single note of the follow-up had been written, Bon Scott was found dead in a friend's car in London. He was 33 years old. The official cause was acute alcohol poisoning. Here's what the timing does to you. They weren't between albums. They weren't on hiatus. They were already inside the momentum. The breakthrough wasn't behind them. It was happening right now. And Bon was pushing ideas forward, bringing the energy that had built Highway to Hell into whatever was going to come next. Back in Black, recorded with Brian Johnson in the months after Scott's death, became one of the 5 best-selling albums in the history of recorded music. Hold that number for a second. That's the size of the wave Bon Scott helped set in motion. He got the door open. He just never got to walk through. And if you've ever watched a breakthrough arrive for someone right before everything stopped, when the future was visible and they didn't make it there, you know that's a different kind of grief. Not just loss, the loss of a story that was already in motion. Number 9, Duane Allman. He was 24 years old, and half the professional guitarists in America were already quietly trying to figure out how he did what he did. Not trying to copy it, trying to understand it. Somebody's calling your name. Duane Allman is in the conversation for the greatest guitarist who ever lived, not because of what he almost became, but because of what he actually was across about 5 years of recorded output. The Allman Brothers at Fillmore East came out in July 1971, and it was the kind of live album that made critics run out of words. The extended jams, Whipping Post, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, weren't just technically extraordinary, they were emotionally devastating. The kind of playing you don't just hear. You feel it somewhere behind your sternum and it doesn't go away. And if you've ever tried to explain to someone who wasn't there why that album matters, you know the conversation doesn't quite land until they hear it themselves. But here's the thing most people don't talk about enough. Duane wasn't just the Allman Brothers. He was one of the most sought-after session guitarists in the country. He played on Aretha Franklin sessions, on Wilson Pickett records. And then, in what might be the single greatest uncredited appearance in rock history, he showed up on Derek and the Dominoes' Layla, that slide guitar you know, note for note without thinking. That's Duane Allman on Eric Clapton's record, turning a great song into something that stops rooms. He was in the middle of recording the follow-up to At Fillmore East, what became Eat a Peach, when it happened, October 29, 1971. A motorcycle accident in Macon, Georgia. He died that day. He was 24 years old. The point isn't the albums that got finished. The point is that at 24, with 2 recording identities already in the conversation for legendary, Duane Allman was still figuring out what he was, and nobody's figured out that same thing since. Real talk, only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 8, Keith Moon. The album cover said, "Not to be taken away." It was right there, stenciled on the back of Keith Moon's chair. Nobody read it as a warning. By 1978, The Who were supposed to be finished. Punk had declared them irrelevant. They were the old guard, the dinosaurs, the bands you mentioned respectfully and then moved past. And then, Who Are You arrived? Commercial, sharp, alive. A band that had fought back against their own irrelevance and won. You could hear Keith on the title track and think, this isn't over, not even close. The album was released on August 18, 1978. Keith Moon died on September 7, 1978, just under a month after it came out. He took an accidental overdose of clomethazole, a drug he'd been prescribed specifically to help him withdraw from alcohol. He was 32 years old. And here's the detail you don't get past. On the cover of Who Are You, Moon is straddling a chair, sitting on it backwards, and stenciled on the back are the words, "Not to be taken away." Nobody planned that. Nobody staged it. It was just a prop from a warehouse that happened to be there. And then he was gone, and suddenly the comeback album you bought became something you could only look at a certain way. The Who kept going. They brought in Kenny Jones on drums, made more records, toured arenas. But if you ask the people who lived through it, the ones who'd been in the pit since the early days, most of them will tell you the same thing. The Who died with Keith. Not because of his talent alone, because Keith Moon was the chaos at the center. The energy that made everything feel slightly dangerous, and rock music needs that specific energy. Without it, you've got craft, which matters, but it's not the same thing. Some of y'all know exactly what I mean by that without me having to explain it further. Number 7, Randy Rhoads. He had already recorded 2 of the most influential metal albums in history. He was 25 years old, and just days before he died, he had told Ozzy Osbourne he was done touring. He wanted to go back to school and get a master's degree in classical music at UCLA. When Randy Rhoads joined Ozzy's band in 1979, Ozzy had just been fired from Black Sabbath, and a lot of people figured that was the end of that story. They were wrong. Blizzard of Oz in 1980 and Diary of a Madman in 1981, those weren't just good records. They were genuinely new. Randy's neoclassical approach, the precision, the runs, the way technique and emotion lived in the same phrase, created a template that guitarists are still building from today. On March 19, 1982, the tour bus was parked at Flying Baron Estates near Leesburg, Florida. The band's bus driver, Andrew Aycock, who held an expired pilot's license, had gotten access to a small Beechcraft Bonanza plane and taken it up for a joyride. After a couple of passes with other passengers, he came back and invited more riders. Randy was afraid of flying. He got on anyway, wanting to take some aerial photos. On a pass over the tour bus, the plane clipped the vehicle, went out of control, hit a nearby pine tree, and crashed into the garage of an adjacent house. All three on board died. Randy Rhoads was 25 years old. His sister Kathy later revealed that Randy had told Ozzy just days before the crash that he was done touring and wanted to come home. Their mother was already contacting UCLA to begin the process of getting him enrolled in a master's program in classical music. When Ozzy heard this, he said, "Are you crazy?" "You're a rock star," Randy replied. "That's just not what I want right now." That's where the conversation stopped. And if you've ever had to choose between the thing that's making you famous and the thing you actually care about, you know that conversation wasn't finished yet. Number 6. Jim Morrison.
Love me one time, babe.
LA Woman was released April 1971. Jim Morrison was dead by July, and a serious case can be made that LA Woman is the best thing the Doors ever made.
Love me twice today.
By 1971, Morrison was supposed to be finished. The press had moved on. The leather pants, the arrests, the erratic performances, the rock shaman had apparently curdled into a cautionary tale. The Doors' recent albums had underperformed. Morrison had relocated to Paris, partly to escape the rock god persona, partly to find whatever was underneath it. And then, LA Woman arrived, stripped back to its blues roots, looser, rawer, more honest than anything they'd done in years. Morrison sounded like someone who had finally shed a performance and found the actual person underneath. You can hear it in the title track, that slow, deliberate, burning thing. It sounds like a man becoming something he hasn't named yet.
Today, love me 2 times, babe.
He died July 3rd, 1971, in his bathtub in Paris. He was 27, no autopsy was performed, and the official cause was listed as heart failure. Nobody witnessed it, and the full picture has never been entirely clear.
Love me 2 times, I'm gone away.
Here's what actually gets me about the timing. He wasn't just releasing an album, he was in the middle of becoming someone else. He'd talked about staying in Paris for a year, writing, stepping outside the whole rock world. He was 27 and actively trying to figure out what came after Jim Morrison, the rock god. 3 months after the best creative and commercial moment the Doors had seen in years, that figuring out stopped, permanently.
Love me twice today.
And honestly, I'd argue LA Woman is underrated even now. Most people come to the Doors through the early records. If you've never listened to it start to finish, it's a different thing entirely. I'm curious whether you agree. Number 5. John Bonham. Led Zeppelin was rehearsing at Bray Studios for their first North American tour since 1977, a tour set to begin October 17th in Montreal. 2 weeks of rehearsals, the band was ready, and then John Bonham had a terrible night. By 1980, Led Zeppelin had been through a brutal stretch. The death of Robert Plant's son, a canceled U.S. tour, years of careful regrouping, but they'd come back. In Through the Outdoor in 1979. The tour announcement. All 4 members had gathered at Jimmy Page's Windsor home to prepare, and the anticipation was real. On September 24, 1980, Bonham consumed and this number still staggers me, approximately 40 shots of vodka over the course of a 12-hour session. He was found unresponsive the next afternoon at Page's home. He died in his sleep, asphyxiation. He was 32 years old. Here's what Robert Plant later said about the last drive to rehearsal. That morning, Bonham had said he was done with drumming, that everyone else played better than him, that maybe Plant should play drums and he'd sing. That was the last conversation they had on the way to practice. The band announced their disbandment on December 4th, 1980. Their statement said simply that they could not continue without him. And here's what I want you to sit with for a second. There are great rock drummers. There are legendary rock drummers. And then there's a category that might only have one person in it. Drummer whose groove was so physical, so completely embedded in the architecture of the songs, that removing him didn't just change the band. It ended the question of whether the band could exist at all. The reunion conversation came up for decades afterward. Plant would sometimes nod. Page was always interested. Jones was professional about it, but they never did it because Bonham wasn't the drummer. He was the foundation. Don't rebuild a house by finding someone who can swing a hammer. The foundation is structural. When that goes, the house stops being a house. Number 4, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Help me please, get through to my baby.
He'd been sober 4 years. His playing was the best it had ever been in his life. He'd just walked off a stage after what the musicians beside him called one of the most electric performances they'd ever witnessed. And then he boarded a helicopter in dense fog. By 1990, Stevie Ray Vaughan had done something genuinely remarkable. He'd nearly lost himself entirely to addiction. The mid-'80s had come close to taking him out long before anything else could. And then he got clean, truly clean, and what came out the other side was more extraordinary than what had been there before.
All I gotta see is Dutch tone phone.
Instep in 1989 won a Grammy for Best Contemporary Blues Album. The clarity in his playing had changed. More space, more intention, more of him actually present in every note. You could hear the gratitude in it.
Knowing you're alright.
August 27th, 1990, Alpine Valley Music Theater in East Troy, Wisconsin. 2 nights alongside Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, Robert Cray, and his brother Jimmy. The encore, all of them on stage together, felt historic even as it was happening. People who were there still describe it that way. Not "it was great," like they knew. That's a rare thing.
Well, it feels so fine.
After the show, Stevie discovered that the seats originally reserved for him, Jimmy, and Jimmy's wife Connie on one of the helicopters had been taken by members of Clapton's crew. One seat remained. Stevie asked his brother if he could take it. He wanted to get back to Chicago, back to his fiancée.
But you're miles away. Oh, that's not.
Jimmy gave it to him. Jimmy and Connie caught the next flight. The helicopter Stevie boarded hit the side of a ski slope in dense fog, about half a mile from takeoff. He was 35 years old.
Woke up this morning, I was all alone.
And here's what was ahead of him. Not speculation, plans, studio time, a new direction every person close to him confirmed he was moving toward. The post-addiction version of Stevie Ray Vaughan wasn't a restoration of what had existed before. He was someone new, someone who'd been through the fire and come out entirely different on the other side.
Oh, so bad.
The greatest guitar performances are the ones where you can hear the person behind the notes. By 1990, Stevie Ray Vaughan had lived enough to put everything into every single one. And if you were at Alpine Valley that night, I already know you remember where you were standing.
Oh, so bad.
Number 3, Janis Joplin.
And you swear that you just don't know why.
The album was almost done. One vocal track left to record. The band had laid down the music the day before. Janis never came back to finish it.
Always be right.
By the fall of 1970, Janis had spent years being brilliant, and brutalized in roughly equal measure. Cheap Thrills with Big Brother, I Got Dim Old Cosmic Blues Again Mama, with a horn section that never quite found the same pocket she needed, and then Pearl started coming together. A new band, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, who actually matched her energy, and a producer, Paul Rothchild, who understood what a voice like hers needed the room to do. This was the album she'd been trying to make for years. She died October 4th, 1970, alone in her room at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood, heroin overdose. She was 27. The backing track for a song called Buried Alive in the Blues had been recorded on October 3rd, the day before she died. She was scheduled to record her vocal the next morning. She never did.
Much more than I did.
The track appears on Pearl as an instrumental, a moment of absence sitting right in the middle of the album. There's something about listening to it when you know what it is. The music plays, the voice isn't there, and you fill in the silence yourself, and you can't not. Pearl was released January 11th, 1971. It hit #1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for 9 weeks. Me and Bobby McGee hit #1 on the Hot 100. Posthumously, the biggest commercial moment of her career happened after she was gone, and she never got to hear a single one of those numbers.
Honey, like you always seem to do.
Here's what I want to say plainly. Janis Joplin spent years fighting for recognition that only fully arrived when she wasn't there to receive it. That's a loneliness that doesn't have a proper name. One vocal track, that's how close Pearl was to finished. The music existed. All it needed was the voice. The voice had already done everything else on the record.
If you ever want me, come on and cry.
Number 2, Jimi Hendrix.
I'm going on to shoot my old lady.
In September 1970, Jimi Hendrix wasn't at the top of his career. He was at the beginning of what came after the top, and that distinction is everything. He'd already done things nobody else had thought to do. Are You Experienced? Axis, Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland. He'd built his own studio, Electric Lady Studios in New York, specifically to record on his own terms, without the pressure of someone else's clock running. He had unlimited time to develop ideas that were already unlike anything anyone else was making. He died September 18, 1970. Barbiturate intoxication. He was 27. And here's what was happening in the weeks before. He'd just come back from the Isle of Wight Festival, one of his last major performances. He was deep into new material, moving toward funk and jazz territories that were starting to show up in recordings. The album he was building, what we eventually got decades later as first rays of the new rising sun, was only partially recorded. He was mid-sentence. Stay with me on this for a second, because I think people don't fully sit with what this means. Jimi Hendrix didn't just play guitar. He redefined what the electric guitar was capable of. There's before Hendrix and there's after Hendrix. Those are two genuinely different eras of the instrument.
I said, before you go with that gun in your hand.
And in September 1970, after Hendrix hadn't started yet, he was still inside the work, still building, still pushing towards something even he hadn't arrived at yet. He was 27. And everything that came after him, 50-plus years of guitarists building entire careers on fragments of what he was doing in half a decade, all of that traces back to work that was still in progress when it stopped. You've heard Voodoo Child. You know there's something in that recording that can't be replicated. That's because it isn't technique. It's Hendrix thinking out loud, and he was right in the middle of a thought. Number 1. John Lennon.
For today.
Double Fantasy was released November 17, 1980. John Lennon was shot and killed December 8, 1980. 21 days. The comeback was 21 days old.
I hope someday you'll join us.
He'd been away for 5 years, not just from touring, from music entirely. He was raising his son, Sean, living a life that wasn't the John Lennon life, by intention. And when Double Fantasy arrived, you could hear that in the record. Someone who had chosen quiet for years and was finally, genuinely ready to say something again. Vulnerable, present, new, not a nostalgia project, actual work.
And the world.
On December 8th, Chapman approached Lennon outside the Dakota as he and Yoko were leaving for a recording session at Record Plant. Lennon signed a copy of Double Fantasy for him. They went to the studio and finished work on a track.
All the people.
The couple returned home around 10:50 that night to find Chapman still waiting. He fired 5 shots. 4 of them hit. John Lennon died at Roosevelt Hospital. He was 40 years old.
Imagine all the.
Before his death, Just Like Starting Over had climbed to number 3 on the US charts. After his murder, it reached number 1. Imagine followed it to number 1 in the UK. And here's the thing about that moment. The world didn't need hindsight to understand what it had lost. It understood immediately, in real time. In December 1980, people grasped it the day it happened. That's not nostalgia. That's recognizing a living thing and watching it stop. There were plans for what came next. More recording, discussions about touring for the first time since 1966. He was in it, really in it, not performing a comeback, but genuinely engaged and building something that felt like it was leading somewhere.
Imagine there's no country.
21 days. That's not a career cut short. That's a sentence interrupted mid-word. He wasn't wrapping anything up. He was starting something. And we got 21 days of it. And if you've ever heard Double Fantasy, knowing what you know, knowing those 21 days are all there is, it lands differently because you're not hearing a finished statement. You're hearing someone who finally figured out how to be both John Lennon and a person at the same time, both things at once, for 21 days.
Imagine no possession.